Baby discovered German Shepherd, caught in animal trap. What baby did next? Left everyone in tears. The story you're about to listen to will break your heart and then put it back together again. What this young boy did when he found an injured dog will leave you speechless. If you've ever wondered about the power of a child's heart, this tale will show you just how mighty innocence can be. Like, share, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The morning sun filtered through the dense tree canopy, casting dappled shadows on the narrow dirt path. 6-year-old Ethan skipped ahead of his father, Daniel, his bright red sneakers kicking up small puffs of dust with each step. The woods near their rural home in Pine Creek Valley had always been their special place, a sanctuary where they escaped the echoing emptiness of their small cabin that had felt too quiet since Ethan's mother passed away 3 years ago. "Not too far ahead, buddy," Daniel called out, adjusting the small backpack that held their lunch and first aid kit. His weathered hands, calloused from years of carpentry work, gripped the straps tightly. Something about today made him uneasy, though he couldn't quite place why. Maybe it was the unusual silence in the forest, no bird song, no rustling of small creatures in the underbrush. Ethan turned, his face lit up with the unbridled joy only children can muster. "I'm exploring, Dad, like Lewis and Clark." His history lessons from school had sparked a new obsession with famous explorers, and Daniel couldn't help but smile at his son's enthusiasm. "Explorers stay where their team can see them," Daniel replied, quickening his pace to narrow the gap between them. "And they always follow the trail." But Ethan had already disappeared around a bend in the path, his laughter echoing back through the trees. Daniel felt a twinge of annoyance, mixed with the constant low-grade anxiety that had become his companion since becoming a single father. He'd been both mom and dad to Ethan since Sarah died, and some days the weight of that responsibility felt crushing. When Daniel rounded the bend, his heart jumped to his throat. Ethan was gone. "Ethan," he called, his voice steady despite the panic building in his chest. "Ethan!" For 3 terrible seconds, there was nothing. Then, "Dad! Dad! Come quick!" The voice came from somewhere off the trail to the left, beyond a thick patch of blackberry bushes. Daniel didn't hesitate. He plunged through the thorny barrier, ignoring the sharp pricks that tore at his arms and legs. "I told you to stay on the path," Daniel shouted, fear making his voice harsher than he intended. "Where are you?" "Over here." Ethan's voice sounded strange, tight and shaky. "Hurry, Dad. She's hurt real bad." "She?" Daniel pushed through the last of the brambles into a small clearing and froze at the sight before him. Ethan was kneeling next to what appeared to be a large German Shepherd, its fur matted with dirt and dried blood. The dog's right hind leg was caught in the merciless jaws of a metal trap, the kind that had been banned in their county for years. A thin chain anchored the trap to a nearby tree. The animal's chest heaved with labored breaths, and Daniel could see its ribs protruding beneath its dirty coat. "Ethan, get away from there right now!" Daniel lunged forward, ready to snatch his son away from the injured animal. Even the gentlest dog could be dangerous when in pain. "It could bite you!" But Ethan didn't move. He stayed perfectly still, his small hand hovering inches above the dog's head. "She won't hurt me, Dad," he said with absolute certainty. "She's asking for help." Daniel reached his son and crouched beside him, ready to pull him back at the first sign of aggression from the dog. But what he saw in the animal's eyes made him pause. There was fear there, yes, and pain, but no hint of aggression. Instead, the dog looked at Ethan with something that seemed almost like hope. "She's been here a long time," Ethan whispered, pointing to the disturbed earth around the trap. "Look, she tried to dig out." Daniel surveyed the scene. The dog had indeed clawed frantically at the ground around the trap, but had only succeeded in burying it deeper, the metal teeth sinking cruelly into her leg. A worn leather collar hung loosely around her neck, with a small tarnished tag that read, "Luna." "Her name is Luna," Ethan said, carefully reaching out to touch the filthy tag. The dog's eyes followed Ethan's movement, but she made no attempt to snap at him. When his fingers gently touched her neck, she even tried to lift her head, a small whimper escaping her throat. "We need to go get help," Daniel said, already calculating how long it would take them to hike back to the truck and drive to the ranger station. "We're at least 4 miles from the trailhead, and my phone has no reception out here." He stood up, extending his hand to Ethan. "Come on, buddy. We'll tell the rangers exactly where she is, and they'll come rescue her." But Ethan didn't take his father's hand. He stayed beside Luna, his young face set in lines of determination that Daniel had never seen before. If we leave her, she'll die. The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating in their truth. Daniel looked at the dog's condition more carefully. Her tongue lolled from her mouth, dry and cracked from dehydration. The wound where the trap bit into her leg was infected, angry red streaks spreading up toward her body. She probably hadn't had food or water for days. Ethan, she might be dangerous. We don't know this dog. She's not dangerous, Ethan insisted. She's scared and hurt. Mom always said we have to help those who can't help themselves. The mention of Sarah hit Daniel like a physical blow. It had been over a year since Ethan had spoken so directly about his mother. The memory of Sarah's voice seemed to float between them in the still forest air. He could almost hear her saying those exact words. Your mother would be worried about you getting hurt, Daniel countered, though his resolve was weakening. Ethan looked up at his father, his eyes suddenly too old for his 6-year-old face. Mom would help her, he said simply. You know she would. And Daniel did know. Sarah had been the kind of person who couldn't pass a stray cat without bringing it home, who volunteered at animal shelters on weekends, who had once spent 3 hours helping a turtle with a cracked shell get to a wildlife rehabilitation center. It was one of the countless things he had loved about her. Daniel sighed and knelt down again, this time to examine the trap. It was an old model, rusted but still wickedly effective. The spring mechanism was powerful. It would take considerable strength to pry the jaws apart. I'm going to try to call for help first, he said, pulling out his cell phone even though he already knew there would be no signal. He was right. Not a single bar appeared on the screen. We're on our own here. Ethan nodded solemnly, as if he had expected nothing else. What do we do? Daniel set his backpack on the ground and began to unzip it. First, we need to give her some water. He pulled out their water bottle and a collapsible dog bowl he had started carrying when they'd talked about maybe getting a dog someday. He'd forgotten it was even in there. Sarah again. She'd always been the prepared one. As Daniel poured water into the bowl, Ethan spoke softly to Luna. It's okay, girl. We're going to help you. My dad can fix anything. The confidence in his son's voice sent a wave of emotion through Daniel. If only that were true. He set the bowl near Luna's head, but she was too weak to drink on her own. Daniel cupped his hand, filled it with water, and brought it to Luna's mouth. After a moment's hesitation, she lapped weakly at the offering. Good girl, Daniel murmured, surprising himself with the gentleness in his voice. That's it. Small sips. While Luna drank, Daniel assessed the trap more thoroughly. The mechanism was simple but brutal. To release it, he would need to compress the powerful springs on either side simultaneously, then pull the jaws apart. I'm going to try to open the trap, he told Ethan. I need you to move back, okay? Just in case she gets scared when I touch her leg. Ethan shook his head. She needs me to stay with her, he said, with the unshakable logic of a child. She's less scared when I talk to her. Daniel wanted to argue, but there was no time. Luna's condition was deteriorating by the minute. Okay, but stay by her head. And if I tell you to move back, you do it immediately. Promise? Promise, Ethan agreed. Daniel pulled on the thin work gloves he kept in his pack and positioned himself beside Luna's trapped leg. The dog watched him warily, but didn't growl or try to move away. Hey there, Luna, he said, trying to keep his voice calm and steady. This is going to hurt, but we're trying to help you. Just hang in there. He placed his hands on the springs on either side of the trap and began to compress them. The rusted metal resisted, and Daniel strained, his muscles burning with the effort. Luna whimpered, but didn't try to bite. It's okay, Luna, Ethan whispered, stroking her dirty fur. My dad is super strong. He can lift me up with just one arm. Despite the tension of the moment, Daniel felt a smile tugging at his lips. The way Ethan saw him, as someone invincible, capable of anything, both humbled and terrified him. He pressed harder on the springs. There was a sudden give as one of the springs compressed fully. Almost there, Daniel grunted, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked on the second spring. With a metallic groan, the second spring gave way. Daniel quickly pulled the jaws of the trap apart, revealing Luna's mangled leg beneath. The sight made his stomach turn. The fur was torn away, exposing raw flesh and bone. Luna let out a pained yelp and tried to pull away. Hold her still, Daniel shouted as he fought to keep the trap open. Ethan wrapped his arms around Luna's neck, whispering into her ear. It's almost over, girl. You're being so brave. Just a little longer. Somehow, miraculously, Luna settled, her body trembling but no longer fighting. With the trap fully open, Daniel nodded to Ethan. "Pull her leg out, careful." Ethan gently took hold of Luna's body and pulled her away from the trap while Daniel held the jaws open. As soon as her leg was free, Daniel released the trap. It snapped shut with enough force to send a shower of dirt into the air. Luna lay panting on the ground, her injured leg oozing blood and a yellowish fluid. Daniel immediately opened the first aid kit and pulled out antiseptic wipes and gauze. "This is going to sting," he warned, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to Ethan or Luna. As soon as the antiseptic touched the wound, Luna whimpered and tried to pull away. Ethan immediately wrapped his arms around her neck again. "It's medicine to make you better," he explained to the dog. "Like when I scrape my knee and Dad puts the stingy stuff on it." Daniel worked quickly, cleaning the wound as best he could and wrapping it with gauze. It wasn't enough. Luna needed a vet, and soon. The wound was deep, and infection had clearly set in. "We need to get her to a vet," Daniel said, packing up the first aid supplies. "But I don't know how we're going to carry her. She must weigh at least 70 pounds. Ethan looked around the clearing, his young mind working. "What about a stretcher, like in the movies when someone breaks their leg?" Daniel blinked, surprised at the practical suggestion. "That's actually a good idea." He scanned the area and spotted several fallen branches that might work. "Good thinking, buddy. Can you stay with Luna while I gather some branches?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "We'll be right here." As Daniel collected sturdy branches, he could hear Ethan talking softly to Luna. "My mom got sick when I was little. She went to heaven, but before she did, she told me to always be kind. I think she sent you to us. Maybe you're lonely too." Daniel paused, branches in hand, a lump forming in his throat. Ethan rarely spoke about Sarah, and when he did, it was usually to ask questions about what she had been like. This was different, more intimate, more raw. Daniel felt like he was eavesdropping on a private conversation. He returned to the clearing with armfuls of branches and removed his jacket. "We can use my jacket as the bed of the stretcher," he explained to Ethan as he began weaving the branches through the sleeves. Together, they constructed a makeshift stretcher. It wasn't pretty, but it looked sturdy enough to hold Luna's weight. "Now for the hard part," Daniel said, positioning the stretcher beside the injured dog. "We need to move her without hurting her more." Ethan nodded, his face serious. "I'll help." With extreme care, Daniel slid his arms under Luna's body while Ethan supported her injured leg. The dog whimpered, but didn't struggle as they lifted her gently onto the stretcher. "Good girl," Ethan praised, stroking her head. "You're the bravest dog in the whole world." Daniel secured Luna to the stretcher using the straps from his backpack. She looked pitiful, her eyes glazed with pain, but she was still hanging on. "It's a long walk back," Daniel warned Ethan, "and it's going to be hard carrying her." "We can do it," Ethan said with absolute confidence. "We have to." Daniel couldn't argue with that simple truth. He positioned himself at the front of the stretcher, while Ethan took the lighter end at Luna's head. Together they lifted. The stretcher was heavier than Daniel had anticipated, and they had only gone a few yards when he realized they would need to rest soon. But looking at Ethan's determined face, he kept that thought to himself. They had just reached the main trail when the first distant rumble of thunder reached them. Daniel looked up through the trees and saw dark clouds gathering. "We need to pick up the pace," he said, adjusting his grip on the stretcher. "There's a storm coming." Ethan nodded, his face set in lines of concentration as he struggled with his end of the stretcher. Though Daniel was bearing most of the weight, it was clearly exhausting for the boy. "You're doing great, buddy," Daniel encouraged. "Just like a real rescue team." That brought a smile to Ethan's tired face. "Like search and rescue heroes?" Exactly like that. They trudged on, the trail becoming steeper and more challenging. Luna lay still on the stretcher, only the rise and fall of her chest indicating she was alive. The storm clouds grew darker, and the air turned heavy with the promise of rain. "How much further?" Ethan asked. After what seemed like hours, his voice strained. Daniel checked his watch. They had been walking for nearly 40 minutes, but their progress was painfully slow with the stretcher. "We're about halfway to the truck," he admitted, "but we might need to find shelter soon. That storm is getting closer." As if on cue, a flash of lightning split the sky, followed seconds later by a deafening crack of thunder. Luna whimpered, trying to raise her head. "It's okay, Luna," Ethan soothed, shifting his grip on the stretcher to free one hand and stroke her head. "It's just loud noise." The first fat raindrops began to fall, quickly turning into a steady downpour. The trail became slick with mud, making each step treacherous. "Dad, look!" Ethan suddenly called out, pointing ahead. "Is that a cave?" Daniel squinted through the rain and saw what his son had spotted, a dark opening in the rock face beside the trail. It wasn't exactly a cave, more of a deep overhang, but it would provide shelter from the worsening storm. "Good eye, buddy. Let's get in there until the storm passes." They carefully maneuvered the stretcher off the trail and into the rocky shelter. It was dry inside, the ground covered with a layer of pine needles and leaves that had blown in over time. Daniel gently set down his end of the stretcher, and Ethan did the same. They both sank to the ground, exhausted. Outside, the storm raged, sheets of rain turning the trail into a small stream. "We're stuck here for a while," Daniel said, brushing wet hair from his eyes. He turned his attention to Luna, checking her bandages. They were soaked through, and her breathing seemed more labored than before. Ethan crawled closer to Luna and placed a small hand on her side. "Dad, she feels hot." Daniel reached out and touched Luna's nose. It was hot and dry, a bad sign. He felt along her body. She was burning with fever. "The infection is getting worse," he said, trying to keep the worry from his voice. "We need to change her bandages and give her more water." He opened his backpack, now half empty, since they'd used most of its contents to make the stretcher, and pulled out the remaining clean gauze and their water bottle. As he rewrapped Luna's wound, she barely reacted, her eyes dull and unfocused. "She's getting sicker, isn't she?" Ethan asked quietly. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. There was no point in lying to his son. "Yes, buddy. She needs a doctor." "Like when Mom got sick," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of the rain. Daniel's hands stilled. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough. "Like that." Ethan was silent for a long moment, staring at Luna. Then he began to sing, softly at first, then with growing confidence. It was the lullaby Daniel sang to him when he was sick or couldn't sleep, the same one Sarah had sung to both of them. "Hush now, don't you worry, the stars are watching over you. Close your eyes and dream now of skies so bright and blue." Daniel's throat tightened as he listened to his son's clear voice singing Sarah's lullaby. He hadn't even realized Ethan remembered it. Something incredible happened as Ethan sang. Luna's rapid, shallow breathing began to slow and deepen. Her tense muscles relaxed slightly, and she turned her head toward the sound of Ethan's voice. "Keep singing," Daniel whispered, not wanting to break the spell. Ethan sang the lullaby again, his small hand gently stroking Luna's head. By the time he finished the second verse, the dog had visibly calmed, her eyes fixed on Ethan's face. "She likes my singing," Ethan said with quiet wonder. "Of course she does," Daniel replied, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Your mom always said you had the sweetest voice in the world." Outside, the storm continued to rage. Lightning flashed, illuminating the interior of their shelter in brief, stark bursts. The thunder that followed seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. "Will the storm ever stop?" Ethan asked, huddling closer to Luna as if to protect her. Daniel checked his watch again. "It might last a while. These summer storms can be intense." He looked at Luna, concern gnawing at him. Her condition was deteriorating, and they were still hours from help. Even if the storm passed quickly, it would be nearly impossible to navigate the trail in the dark. "Dad?" Ethan's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "I think someone's out there." Daniel froze, listening intently. At first, he heard nothing but the pounding rain and rumbling thunder. Then, faintly, the crack of a branch breaking. He moved to the entrance of their shelter and peered out into the storm. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then a flash of lightning revealed a figure standing on the trail, not 20 yards away. The brief illumination showed a man in a rain-slicked jacket, holding what appeared to be a rifle. Daniel instinctively stepped back, pushing Ethan further into the shadows of their shelter. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "Someone's out there." "Is it a ranger?" Ethan asked hopefully. "Coming to help Luna?" Daniel shook his head. "I don't think so." They waited in tense silence as the figure moved closer to their shelter. Another flash of lightning, and the man was at the entrance, water streaming from his hat and coat. "Hello there," the man called, his voice carrying an edge despite its friendly tone. "Saw you folks from up the trail. Nasty weather to be out in." Daniel positioned himself between the stranger and Ethan. "Just waiting out the storm," he replied cautiously. The man stepped under the overhang, bringing with him the smell of wet wool and something sharper, tobacco and whiskey. He was older than Daniel had first thought, perhaps in his 50s, with a weathered face and eyes that darted quickly around their shelter, taking in Ethan, Daniel, and finally landing on Luna. "Well, I'll be," the man said, his voice changing. "You found my dog." Daniel felt Ethan stiffen beside him. "Your dog?" Daniel asked, unable to keep the skepticism from his voice. The man nodded, moving further into the shelter. "Yep, that's my Stella. Been missing her for days now. Ran off during a hunting trip last week." "Her name is Luna," Ethan said suddenly, his voice small but firm. "It says so on her collar." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "Luna, Stella, she answers to both. Previous owner named her Luna. I call her Stella." Something didn't feel right. Daniel studied the man more carefully. His clothes were worn but of good quality, his rifle expensive, not the typical equipment of someone who would use illegal traps. "We found her caught in a trap," Daniel said, watching for the man's reaction. "An illegal one." The man's face remained impassive. "Lot of trappers in these woods. Not all of them follow the rules." He stepped closer to Luna. "Let me take her now. I appreciate you folks helping her out." Luna, who had been lying quietly, suddenly tensed. A low growl rumbled in her throat, the first aggressive sound they had heard from her. Her eyes, previously glazed with pain, were now focused sharply on the stranger. "She doesn't seem to recognize you," Daniel observed, moving to stand more firmly between the man and Luna. The stranger's friendly demeanor slipped for a moment, revealing something harder underneath. "Dogs get confused when they're hurt. She'll know me once I get her home." "What's her favorite treat?" Ethan asked suddenly. The man blinked. "What?" "Her favorite treat," Ethan repeated. "If she's your dog, you'd know." For a moment, the man seemed caught off guard. Then he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Beef jerky. She goes crazy for beef jerky." Ethan looked at Luna, who was still growling softly, her eyes fixed on the stranger. "I don't think she's your dog," he said simply. The man's smile vanished. "Listen, kid." "What's your name?" Daniel interrupted, his tone deliberately casual, even as every instinct told him to be on guard. After a slight hesitation, the man answered, Marcus Gage." "Well, Marcus," Daniel said, "we're taking this dog to the vet in town. If she really is yours, you can claim her there, after she gets medical attention." Marcus's face hardened. "That won't be necessary. I'll take her now." He reached for the rifle slung over his shoulder, not quite pointing it at them, but letting his hand rest on it in a clear message. Daniel felt his heart racing. He had no weapon, no way to protect Ethan except with his own body. "Ethan," he said quietly, "go to the back of the shelter." "But Dad—" "Now, Ethan." The boy reluctantly moved back, but instead of retreating, he positioned himself protectively beside Luna. "That's my dog," Marcus said again, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "and I'm taking her with me." Daniel took a measured breath, sizing up the situation. Marcus was bigger, armed, and clearly accustomed to getting his way, but something in Luna's reaction told Daniel everything he needed to know. "I don't think she is your dog," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him, "and we're not handing her over." A tense silence filled the small shelter, broken only by the drumming of rain and the occasional rumble of thunder. Luna's growl grew slightly louder, her eyes never leaving Marcus. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said, his hand tightening on his rifle. "This doesn't have to get complicated." "You set that trap, didn't you?" Daniel asked, the pieces suddenly falling into place. "That's why you're out here in this storm. You're checking your trap line." Marcus's expression flickered, just enough confirmation for Daniel. "Those traps have been illegal in this county for years," Daniel continued. "The game warden would be very interested to hear about it." "The game warden doesn't patrol these woods," Marcus replied with a cold smile, "and nobody will find you out here if things get unpleasant." Ethan's small voice cut through the tension. "You're lying about Luna." Both men turned to look at the boy, who was now sitting with his arm protectively around Luna's neck. "What did you say, kid?" Marcus asked, his tone dangerous. Ethan met the man's gaze without flinching. "Luna says you're not her owner. She says you hurt her." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Dogs don't talk, boy." "They do if you listen," Ethan replied simply. Something in the child's unwavering certainty seemed to unnerve Marcus. He shifted his weight, glancing from Ethan to Luna to Daniel. "Enough of this nonsense. I'm taking my dog." Marcus took a step forward, reaching for the stretcher. In that precise moment, three things happened simultaneously. Daniel moved to block him, Luna lunged forward with a snarl despite her injuries, and a blinding flash of lightning struck a tree just outside the shelter. The deafening crack was followed immediately by the groan of splintering wood. The tree, an old pine weakened by disease, crashed down across the entrance to their shelter, missing Marcus by inches. The force of the impact sent dust and debris flying through the air. Daniel instinctively threw himself over Ethan and Luna, protecting them with his body. When he looked up, Marcus was gone, the fallen tree forming a partial barrier at the entrance. "Dad, are you okay?" Ethan cried, his voice high with fear. Daniel quickly checked himself and his son for injuries. "We're fine, buddy. Just some scratches." Through the gap created by the fallen tree, Daniel could see Marcus scrambling up the trail, casting frightened glances back at the shelter. The lightning strike and falling tree had spooked him enough to retreat, for now. "He's leaving," Daniel said, relief washing through him. "But he might come back." Ethan hugged Luna tighter. "We need to get away from here." Daniel nodded, surveying their situation. The storm was beginning to ease, the thunder more distant now, the rain reduced to a steady patter. The fallen tree partially blocked their exit, but left enough space for them to squeeze through. "We need to move quickly," Daniel decided. "Can you help me with Luna?" Ethan nodded, determination replacing fear on his young face. Together they maneuvered the stretcher toward the opening. Daniel went through first, then helped guide the stretcher with Luna through the gap, with Ethan pushing from behind. Once outside, Daniel scanned the trail in both directions. No sign of Marcus, but that didn't mean he was gone for good. "We can't take the main trail," Daniel said, making a quick decision. "He'll expect us to head back toward the trailhead." "Where will we go?" Ethan asked, adjusting his grip on the stretcher. Daniel gestured to a barely visible deer path that branched off from the main trail. "That way. It's steeper, but it should eventually connect with the fire road about a mile from where we parked." The path was indeed steep and slippery from the rain. Their progress was painfully slow as they struggled to keep the stretcher level while navigating the treacherous terrain. Luna whimpered occasionally when they jostled her, but seemed to understand they were trying to help. Her eyes, though clouded with pain, remained alert, watching the forest around them. After nearly an hour of grueling hiking, Ethan's arms were shaking with exhaustion. "Dad, I need to stop," he admitted, his voice small with disappointment. Daniel immediately set down his end of the stretcher. "Of course, buddy. You've been amazing." They took shelter under a large cedar tree, its dense branches providing some protection from the light rain that continued to fall. Daniel pulled out their last water bottle and let Ethan drink first, then offered some to Luna, who lapped weakly at the water he poured into his palm. As they rested, Daniel noticed Luna's breathing had become more labored, and her body trembled continuously now. The fever was getting worse. "Will she die?" Ethan asked quietly, stroking Luna's head with gentle fingers. Daniel wanted to offer reassurance, but he couldn't bring himself to lie to his son. "I don't know, buddy. She's very sick, but we're doing everything we can to help her." Ethan nodded, his eyes never leaving Luna. "Mom said that sometimes, when someone's really sick, they need more than medicine. They need to know someone cares if they live or die." Daniel felt a lump form in his throat. Those were indeed Sarah's words, spoken during her final days when the treatments had stopped working, and there was nothing left but to face what was coming. He hadn't realized Ethan had heard her say that, or that he had understood enough to remember. "Your mom was very wise," Daniel said softly. "And she was right." Ethan leaned down to whisper in Luna's ear. "I care if you live or die, Luna. I care a lot." As if in response, Luna's tail moved in the slightest of wags. Daniel blinked away tears. "We should keep moving," he said, after they had rested for about 10 minutes. "Not much farther now." They had just stood up to resume their journey when Luna suddenly lifted her head, her ears perked forward. A low growl rumbled in her chest. Daniel froze, listening intently. At first, he heard nothing but the dripping of water from the trees. Then, the unmistakable sound of a branch snapping underfoot. "He found us," Ethan whispered, fear making his voice tremble. Daniel put a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. He gestured for Ethan to stay with Luna, then moved cautiously toward the sound, careful to place his feet silently on the wet ground. Through the trees, he caught a glimpse of movement, Marcus, moving parallel to their position, rifle in hand. He hadn't spotted them yet, but he was methodically searching the area, working his way in a grid pattern like an experienced hunter. Daniel retreated to Ethan and Luna. "We need to hide," he whispered. "Now." Scanning their surroundings, Daniel spotted a dense thicket of blackberry bushes and ferns about 20 yards further down the slope. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. "We're going to move Luna over there," he whispered to Ethan, pointing to the thicket, very quietly. "Then we'll hide and wait for him to pass." Ethan nodded, his eyes wide but determined. With exquisite care, they lifted the stretcher and inched their way toward the hiding spot. Each step was agony as they tried to move silently while carrying their heavy burden. Luna, seeming to sense the danger, remained perfectly still and silent on the stretcher. They had almost reached the thicket when Ethan's foot slipped on the wet ground. He managed to maintain his grip on the stretcher, but a small shower of pebbles cascaded down the slope, rattling through the underbrush. Daniel heard Marcus stop moving, then the sound of footsteps turning in their direction. "Get in there, now!" Daniel urged, helping Ethan maneuver the stretcher into the heart of the thicket. The blackberry thorns scratched at their skin, but they pushed through until they were completely hidden from the trail. Daniel pulled some loose ferns over the stretcher, partially concealing Luna. "Stay absolutely still," he whispered to Ethan, "no matter what happens." Ethan nodded, his face pale but resolute. He placed a reassuring hand on Luna's side, and the dog responded by lying perfectly still, only her eyes moving as she tracked the sounds around them. They could hear Marcus approaching, his footsteps deliberate now that he had a direction to follow. He paused on the trail above their hiding place. "I know you're out here," Marcus called, his voice carrying easily in the damp forest. "This is getting tiresome. Just give me the dog, and you can be on your way." Neither Daniel nor Ethan moved or made a sound. Luna, remarkably, seemed to understand the need for silence. Even her labored breathing had quieted. "That dog is valuable to me," Marcus continued when he received no response. "More valuable than you know. Worth enough that I'm willing to forget this whole incident if you hand her over now." Daniel's mind raced. What did he mean, valuable? Luna was clearly no ordinary pet to inspire such determination in the man. The standoff continued for several tense minutes. Daniel could hear Marcus moving around on the trail above them, searching for signs of their passage. Then, to his horror, he heard the man start to descend the slope toward their hiding place. Daniel prepared himself to fight if necessary. He would not let this man take Luna, and he certainly wouldn't let him harm Ethan. He carefully picked up a heavy stick lying near his hand, gripping it tightly. Just as Marcus was about to reach their thicket, a sound echoed through the forest, the distant but unmistakable howl of a wolf. It was answered by another, closer, then a third. Marcus froze. Daniel could see his boots through the foliage, not 5 feet from their hiding place. The man stood still for a long moment, then muttered a curse and began climbing back up to the trail. "You got lucky," Marcus called out, his voice tighter now, "but these woods aren't safe after dark, especially not with an injured animal bleeding all over the place. Wolves can smell blood from miles away." His footsteps retreated, moving quickly up the trail and eventually fading into silence. Daniel waited a full 5 minutes before daring to move. "I think he's gone," he whispered to Ethan, "but we need to keep moving. Those wolves are real." Ethan's eyes were wide. "Will they attack us?" "Probably not," Daniel said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Wolves usually avoid people, but we shouldn't take chances." They extracted themselves from the thicket, thorns catching on their clothes and scratching their already raw skin. Luna whimpered softly as they moved her, the journey taking its toll on her weakened body. The light was fading quickly now as evening approached. Daniel checked his watch, nearly 6:30 p.m. They had been in the forest far longer than he had planned for their simple morning hike. "We need to get to the fire road before dark," he told Ethan as they once again took up the stretcher. "It's about half a mile that way." They pressed on, each step a battle against exhaustion and the increasingly difficult terrain. Ethan stumbled several times, but refused to give up his end of the stretcher. His determination to save Luna seemed to give him strength beyond his years. As they struggled down a particularly steep section, Daniel noticed something odd about Luna's ear, a small mark partially hidden by dirt and matted fur. He couldn't examine it properly while moving, but it looked like some kind of brand or tattoo. "Dad, look!" Ethan suddenly exclaimed, pointing ahead. Through the trees, Daniel could see the straight line of the fire road cutting through the forest. They had made it. "Great job, buddy," Daniel said, relief flooding through him. "Just a little further." When they finally reached the fire road, both Daniel and Ethan were trembling with exhaustion. They set the stretcher down gently, and Daniel checked Luna's condition. Her breathing was shallow, her body burning with fever, but she was still fighting. "What now?" Ethan asked, collapsing on the ground beside the stretcher. "We're still a long way from the truck." Daniel pulled out his phone, praying for a signal now that they were on higher ground. To his immense relief, a single bar appeared. "Yes!" he exclaimed, quickly dialing 911. The connection was weak, breaking up frequently, but he managed to explain their situation to the emergency dispatcher. Help would be coming, but it would take time to reach them. "They're sending rangers with an ATV," Daniel told Ethan after ending the call. "We need to stay right here so they can find us." Ethan nodded, too exhausted to speak. He curled up beside Luna, his small hand resting on her side, monitoring each labored breath. As they waited, the forest grew darker around them. Daniel used the flashlight on his phone to create a small circle of light. He was acutely aware of every sound in the gathering darkness. The rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, the occasional distant howl that made his skin prickle. "Dad?" Ethan's voice was small in the darkness. "Is Luna going to make it until help comes?" Daniel moved closer to examine the dog. Her condition had deteriorated further. Her breathing now came in short, irregular gasps, and her body trembled continuously with fever. The wound on her leg had begun to seep through the bandages again. "I don't know, buddy," Daniel answered truthfully. "She's very sick." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. "It's not fair. She was trapped and hurt, and now that bad man is trying to take her, and she might die anyway." Daniel pulled his son into a tight hug. "You're right, it's not fair. But you know what? You've already done something amazing for Luna." "What?" Ethan asked, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "You found her. You insisted we help her. Without you, she would have died alone in that trap." Daniel gently turned Ethan's face to look at him. "Whatever happens, you showed her kindness. That matters." Ethan considered this, then nodded slowly. "Mom would be proud, right?" "So proud," Daniel whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "So very proud." They sat in silence after that, waiting and watching over Luna. The minutes stretched into an hour, and Daniel began to worry that the rescue team had gotten lost or couldn't find them in the darkness. Then, just as Ethan had begun to doze against Daniel's shoulder, a faint mechanical sound reached them, the rumble of an engine. "They're coming!" Daniel exclaimed, gently shaking Ethan awake. "They found us!" He used his phone flashlight to signal in the direction of the sound. Soon, the beams of headlights cut through the darkness, and an ATV appeared on the fire road, followed by a second one. Two rangers in uniform quickly approached them. "Are you Daniel Turner?" the first one asked, shining a flashlight over them. "Yes," Daniel confirmed. "This is my son Ethan, and this is Luna. She needs immediate medical attention." The rangers efficiently assessed the situation, radioing for additional support. "We've got a specialized transport vehicle about 15 minutes out," the female ranger, whose name tag read Ramirez, explained. "They'll be able to get all of you back to the trailhead safely." The male ranger, Officer Chen, examined Luna. "This dog is in bad shape," he said grimly. "Was she in a trap?" Daniel nodded. "An illegal one. We found her this morning and removed her, but the infection is severe." Officer Chen's face hardened. "We've been trying to catch trap poachers in this area for months. Did you see who said it?" Daniel hesitated, then decided to tell them everything. "A man named Marcus. He claimed the dog was his, but she was clearly terrified of him. He followed us, tried to take her by force." The rangers exchanged a significant look. "Marcus Gage?" Officer Ramirez asked. "Tall guy, weather-beaten face, expensive rifle?" "That sounds like him," Daniel confirmed, surprised. "You know him?" "We know of him," Officer Chen said. "He owns that big property that borders the north side of the forest. There have been complaints about illegal hunting and trapping, but nothing we could prove. Until now." Officer Ramirez knelt beside Luna, gently examining the wound on her leg. "There's something odd about this dog," she said, frowning. "Most trap victims struggle and make the injury worse, but this looks different." She pulled out a small UV flashlight and shined it on Luna's ear, revealing what Daniel had glimpsed earlier, a small tattoo, invisible under normal light. "Just as I thought," Officer Ramirez said, her voice tight with anger. "This is a service dog. Military, by the looks of this identifier." "A military dog?" Daniel asked, stunned. "What would she be doing out here?" Before Officer Ramirez could answer, the sound of another vehicle approached. A larger ATV with a protected compartment in the back pulled up beside them. "The transport's here," Officer Chen said. "Let's get this dog to a vet immediately." The new rangers quickly but carefully transferred Luna to their vehicle, securing her stretcher in the protected compartment. One of them, a medic, started an IV line in Luna's leg. "This will help stabilize her until we reach the vet," the medic explained. "But we need to hurry." Daniel lifted Ethan into the vehicle beside Luna, then climbed in himself. Officer Ramirez joined them while Officer Chen followed on one of the smaller ATVs. As they bounced down the fire road toward civilization, Ethan refused to leave Luna's side, his small hand resting on her head. "You're going to be okay now," he whispered to her. "We're getting you to a doctor." Daniel watched his son, marveling at the depth of his compassion. In trying to save Luna, Ethan had shown a strength of character that went far beyond his years. Whatever happened next, Daniel knew that Sarah would indeed be proud of the boy they had raised. Luna's eyes fluttered open briefly, finding Ethan's face in the dim light of the compartment. Despite her pain and exhaustion, her tail gave the faintest of wags. Officer Ramirez noticed and smiled. "That dog knows exactly who saved her," she said quietly to Daniel. "She's fighting to stay alive for him." Daniel nodded, his throat too tight for words. In the midst of this ordeal, something remarkable had happened. A connection had formed between his son and this injured animal, something that transcended the barriers of species and speech. It was as if Luna understood everything Ethan had done for her and was determined not to let his efforts be in vain. As the vehicle sped through the darkening forest, Daniel found himself doing something he hadn't done since Sarah died. He prayed, not to any specific deity, but to whatever forces might be listening, asking for one simple thing: let Luna live. For Ethan's sake, let her live. The journey from the forest to the nearest veterinary clinic seemed both endless and too quick. Daniel held Ethan close as the transport vehicle bounced along the fire road, eventually reaching the main trailhead where their truck was parked. Without stopping, they continued on to the small town of Pine Creek. Officer Ramirez used her radio to call ahead, ensuring the local vet would be ready for their arrival. "Alpine Veterinary Clinic has been notified," she told Daniel. "Dr. Lisa Vaughn is staying late for the emergency." When they finally pulled up to the clinic, a team was already waiting outside with a gurney. Daniel had expected they might be taken to an animal shelter or the ranger station, not directly to medical care. "You called ahead for a vet?" he asked, surprised by the efficiency. Officer Ramirez nodded. "For a military service dog? Absolutely. These animals are heroes." Dr. Vaughn, a woman in her 40s with streaks of gray in her dark hair, took charge immediately. "Get her into surgery now," she ordered, as her staff transferred Luna from the stretcher to the gurney. "IV antibiotics, fluids, and blood work stat." Ethan refused to be separated from Luna, running alongside the gurney until they reached a set of double doors. A vet tech gently stopped him. "You can't go in there, sweetheart," she explained kindly. "That's a sterile area. The doctor needs to operate on your dog." "She's not our dog," Ethan said automatically, then hesitated. "I mean, we just found her. But she needs me. She gets scared when I'm not there." The tech knelt to Ethan's level. "I promise we'll take good care of her. You can wait right here, and I'll come tell you how she's doing." Ethan looked to his father for guidance. Daniel nodded, putting a hand on his son's shoulder. "Let the doctors do their job, buddy. We'll be right here if Luna needs us." Reluctantly, Ethan allowed himself to be led to a small waiting room. Officer Ramirez followed, while Officer Chen went to make some calls from his vehicle. "I need to ask you both some questions," Officer Ramirez said once they were seated, "about finding Luna and your encounter with Marcus Gage." Daniel nodded, keeping a protective arm around Ethan. "We'll tell you everything we can." For the next 30 minutes, they recounted their day in detail, finding Luna in the trap, their decision to help her, the confrontation with Marcus, and their difficult journey through the forest. Officer Ramirez recorded their statement and took photos of their scratches and bruises as evidence. "And you're certain he claimed the dog was his?" she asked, reviewing her notes. "He said her name was Stella, not Luna," Ethan piped up. "And Luna was afraid of him. Really afraid." Officer Ramirez smiled at the boy. "That's very helpful, Ethan. Animals are excellent judges of character." Just then, Officer Chen entered the waiting room, his expression serious. "I just got off the phone with Captain Rodriguez at the K9 training center in Carson City. The tattoo matches their records for a dog named Aurora." "Aurora," Daniel repeated, "not Luna?" "Military working dogs often have their names changed between handlers or when they're transferred to different programs," Officer Chen explained. "According to their records, Aurora was a specialized explosive detection dog who served 2 tours in Afghanistan. Ethan's eyes widened. She was in the army? Officer Chen smiled. The Marines, actually. She saved many lives by finding hidden explosives. She was injured in the field about 18 months ago and was brought back to the States for rehabilitation. So, how did she end up in a trap in our forest? Daniel asked. The officer's face darkened. That's where things get interesting. Aurora was due to be retired and adopted by her former handler, but she disappeared from the training facility 6 months ago. They suspected theft but had no leads. Ramirez leaned forward. And let me guess, this happened around the time Marcus Gage was visiting Carson City for that big hunting expo? Exactly, Chen confirmed. Gage's name was actually on their list of persons of interest, but they had no evidence to connect him to the disappearance. Daniel shook his head, trying to process this information. But why would he steal a military dog? What could he possibly want with her? Before either officer could respond, the door to the surgical area opened, and Dr. Vaughn emerged. Her scrubs were stained with blood, and she looked exhausted. Ethan jumped to his feet. Aurora, is she okay? Dr. Vaughn's expression was grave. She's alive, but in critical condition. The infection has spread throughout her system, causing septic shock. We've cleaned and debrided the wound, started her on powerful antibiotics, and we're supporting her with fluids, but what? Daniel prompted when she trailed off. She's lost a lot of blood, the doctor said bluntly, and her blood type is relatively rare for canines. We don't have any compatible blood on hand, and the nearest emergency animal hospital with a blood bank is 3 hours away. Ethan's face crumpled. She's going to die because there's no blood? We're doing everything we can, Dr. Vaughn assured him. I've put calls out to every vet clinic in a 100-mile radius, but it's not looking good. Officer Chen stepped forward. What blood type does she need? DEA 1.1 negative, Dr. Vaughn replied. Only about 15% of dogs have this type. Officer Chen pulled out his phone. The K9 unit in Westridge might have compatible donors. They keep detailed records of their dogs' blood types for emergency situations. He stepped away to make the call. Daniel knelt beside Ethan, who had gone very quiet. Hey, buddy, the doctor and the officers are doing everything they can. Luna, or Aurora, is a fighter, remember? She survived in that trap for days before we found her. Ethan nodded, but tears were streaming down his face. I promised her she'd be okay, he whispered. I promised. Daniel pulled his son into a tight hug, feeling helpless in the face of Ethan's grief. Over the boy's shoulder, he met Dr. Vaughn's eyes, silently asking for reassurance she couldn't honestly give. Officer Chen returned, his expression cautiously hopeful. I've got good news. The Westridge K9 unit has a dog with the right blood type. Officer Miguel Reyes is driving him here now, but it will take at least an hour. Will that be soon enough? Daniel asked Dr. Vaughn. The vet ran a hand through her hair. It's going to be close. We're doing everything we can to keep her stable, but she's very weak. Ethan pulled away from his father's embrace, wiping his tears with determination. Can I see her? Please. Maybe if she knows I'm there, she'll hang on longer. Dr. Vaughn hesitated, then nodded. Normally we don't allow visitors in the ICU, but in this case, follow me. She led them through the surgical area to a small room filled with monitoring equipment. In the center, on a steel table, lay Luna. She was connected to IV lines and monitors, an oxygen mask covering her muzzle. Her leg was heavily bandaged, and her once dirty fur had been cleaned, revealing a beautiful black and tan coat beneath. Ethan approached slowly, his eyes never leaving Luna's face. She looks different, he whispered. We had to shave parts of her fur to place IV lines and clean her wounds, Dr. Vaughn explained. Don't worry, it will grow back. Ethan carefully placed his hand on Luna's head, avoiding the IV line in her front leg. Hi, Luna, he said softly. The doctor says your real name is Aurora, and you're a hero dog from the Marines. That's pretty cool. Luna's eyes remained closed, but the monitor beside her bed showed a slight increase in her heart rate. She hears you, Dr. Vaughn said with surprise. Keep talking to her. Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He pulled a small stool beside Luna's bed and began to talk, his voice gentle but clear. You need to stay strong for a little longer, okay? There's another dog coming to help you. He's going to give you some blood so you can get better. Daniel watched his son with a mixture of pride and heartache. How had this small boy, who had already endured so much loss in his young life, found the strength to care so deeply for an animal he had only known for a day? "You're doing great, buddy," Daniel said, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I'm sure it helps her to hear your voice." For the next hour, Ethan remained by Luna's side, talking, singing, and occasionally just sitting in silence with his hand on her fur. Daniel used the time to give Officer Ramirez a more detailed statement and to call his boss, explaining why he wouldn't be at work the next day. When the vet tech announced that Officer Reyes had arrived with the donor dog, Ethan reluctantly left Luna's side. "I'll be right back," he promised her. "Don't go anywhere." In the main treatment area, Officer Miguel Reyes was waiting with a handsome German Shepherd in a K9 unit vest. The dog sat perfectly at attention, emanating calm authority. "This is Sergeant Major," Officer Reyes introduced. "He's one of our most decorated K9 officers." Dr. Vaughn was already preparing for the blood transfusion. "He's the perfect donor, young, healthy, and the right blood type. We'll take about 450 milliliters, which won't harm him at all, but could save Aurora's life." Ethan approached the K9 officer cautiously. "Your dog is going to help Aurora, get better?" Officer Reyes smiled. "That's the plan? And it's fitting, really. Sergeant Major is Aurora's brother, from the same litter. They were trained together before being assigned to different units." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine at the coincidence. Her brother? How is that possible? Military working dogs are often bred from specific bloodlines known for their intelligence and temperament, Reyes explained. These two were part of a special program. When we heard Aurora had been found, Sergeant Major was the obvious choice for a donor. The transfusion process was quick and efficient. Sergeant Major remained calm throughout, seeming to understand the importance of his role. Once Dr. Vaughn had collected the necessary blood, Officer Reyes took Sergeant Major to a quiet corner to rest and recover. "It will take a few hours to see if the transfusion is working," Dr. Vaughn told them, after starting the infusion into Luna's vein. "You should both get some rest. There's a motel down the street if you want to clean up and get some sleep." Daniel looked down at himself and Ethan for the first time since their ordeal began. They were filthy, covered in mud, scratches, and dried blood, some theirs, some Luna's. A shower and clean clothes would be welcome, but he knew Ethan wouldn't want to leave. "Can we stay here?" Ethan asked, confirming Daniel's thoughts. "I promised Luna I'd be with her." Dr. Vaughn's expression softened. "There's a small break room with a couch. You can use that, and the staff bathroom has a shower. I'll have one of the techs find you some clean scrubs to wear while your clothes are being washed." "Thank you," Daniel said, suddenly overwhelmed by the kindness they had been shown, for everything. While Ethan kept vigil by Luna's side, Daniel took the opportunity to shower and change into the offered scrubs. When he returned to the ICU, he found Ethan had fallen asleep, his head resting on the edge of Luna's bed, one hand still touching her fur. Officer Ramirez was standing in the doorway, watching them with a gentle expression. "Your son is something special," she said quietly as Daniel approached. Not many adults would have shown such dedication to a strange dog. Daniel nodded, a lump in his throat. He's always been compassionate, but this is different. It's like he and Luna connected on some level I can't explain. "Animals know," Ramirez said simply. "They recognize goodness in people, especially dogs like Aurora, who are trained to read human emotions and intentions." "Do you think she'll make it?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ramirez looked at the sleeping dog, her expression thoughtful. "Military dogs are the toughest animals I've ever encountered. If anyone can pull through, it's her." She turned to Daniel with a more serious expression. "But there's something else you should know. Officer Chen has been in touch with the district attorney's office. They're preparing to file charges against Marcus Gage." "Good," Daniel said firmly. "He should be punished for what he did." "The thing is," Ramirez continued, "they'll need your testimony, and possibly Ethan's as well. Gage is a powerful man in this county. He's donated to a lot of political campaigns. Some people might be reluctant to go against him." Daniel looked at his sleeping son, then at Luna, fighting for her life because of one man's cruelty. "We'll testify, whatever it takes." Ramirez nodded. "I thought you might say that. Just be prepared. This could get complicated." After she left, Daniel carefully lifted Ethan and placed him on a small cot the staff had set up in the ICU. He covered his son with a blanket, then took up the vigil beside Luna's bed. "I don't know if you can hear me," he whispered to the sleeping dog, "but my son believes in you, so I'm going to believe in you too. Fight, Luna. Fight for Ethan." The night passed slowly. Daniel dozed occasionally, but woke at every change in the beeping of Luna's monitors. Dr. Vaughn came in regularly to check Luna's condition, adjusting medications and monitoring the effects of the transfusion. Around 3 in the morning, Luna's vital signs began to improve. Her fever dropped slightly, and her breathing became less labored. By dawn, Dr. Vaughn was cautiously optimistic. "She's responding to the treatment," she told Daniel when she came in for her morning check. "The blood transfusion seems to be working, and the antibiotics are finally getting ahead of the infection." Daniel felt a wave of relief wash over him. "She's going to make it?" "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Dr. Vaughn cautioned. "She's still in critical condition, and there's the matter of her leg. The damage is extensive. We may need to consider amputation if the tissue doesn't respond to treatment." "Amputation?" Daniel repeated, his heart sinking. "It's not as bad as it sounds," Dr. Vaughn assured him. "Dogs adapt remarkably well to 3 legs. Many lead completely normal, active lives." Ethan stirred on his cot, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. "Is Luna okay?" he asked immediately, his voice thick with sleep. "She's doing better this morning," Daniel told him, deciding to keep the possibility of amputation to himself for now. "The doctor says the blood from her brother is helping." Ethan hurried to Luna's side. To their surprise, Luna's eyes opened slightly at his approach. Her tail gave a feeble wag. "She knows you're here," Dr. Vaughn said with a smile. "Talk to her. It helps." Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He resumed his place beside Luna, chatting to her about everything and nothing, describing his school, his friends, the treehouse Daniel was building for him back home. By mid-morning, Luna was stable enough that Dr. Vaughn suggested Daniel take Ethan to get some proper food and rest at the motel. "You've both been through a traumatic experience," she pointed out. "You need to take care of yourselves, too." Daniel nodded, realizing how exhausted he really was. "Come on, buddy. Let's get some breakfast and maybe a nap. We can come back in a few hours." To his surprise, Ethan agreed without protest, suggesting just how tired the boy truly was. He gave Luna a gentle pat. "I'll be back soon. Keep getting better, okay?" At the motel, Daniel splurged on a room with 2 queen beds and a small kitchenette. After a proper shower and a change into clean clothes provided by Officer Ramirez, who had retrieved their bags from the truck, Ethan fell asleep almost immediately. Daniel took the opportunity to make some necessary calls, to his boss explaining the situation and requesting a few more days off, to their neighbor asking her to check on the house, and finally to his health insurance company, inquiring whether they had any provisions for pet care. Unsurprisingly, they did not. That led to his next worry, the cost of Luna's treatment. Dr. Vaughn hadn't mentioned payment yet, but Daniel knew emergency veterinary care wasn't cheap. Between the surgery, medications, and ongoing care, the bill would likely be thousands of dollars, money he simply didn't have as a single father, working as a construction foreman. But looking at Ethan sleeping peacefully for the first time since they'd found Luna, Daniel knew he would find a way. He couldn't bear to see his son heartbroken if they had to give Luna up, because they couldn't afford her care. They returned to the clinic in the early afternoon to find Luna's condition continuing to improve. She was more alert, her eyes following them as they entered the room, and she managed to lift her head when Ethan approached. "She's a fighter," Dr. Vaughn said, clearly impressed. "Her blood work is looking much better, and the infection is responding to the antibiotics." "What about her leg?" Daniel asked quietly, while Ethan was occupied with greeting Luna. Dr. Vaughn's expression grew more serious. "We'll need to make a decision soon. The damage is severe, and while we might be able to save the leg with multiple surgeries, there's no guarantee she'd ever regain full function. Amputation would be quicker, less painful in the long run, and give her a better chance at a normal life." Daniel nodded, understanding the difficult choice ahead. "I should talk to Ethan about it. And I should probably speak with whoever is in charge of her case officially. Since she's a military dog, I assume the Marines will want her back." "That's the complication," Dr. Vaughn admitted. "I've been in touch with the military working dog program. Technically, Aurora is still military property, but she was already slated for retirement before she was stolen. Her injury in Afghanistan, combined with this new trauma, means she's no longer suitable for service." "So, what happens to her?" Daniel asked. Usually, retired military dogs are offered first to their handlers for adoption. Her former handler, Marine Staff Sergeant Lisa Coleman, has been notified that Aurora has been found. She's apparently very eager to be reunited with her. Daniel felt a mixture of emotions at this news. Of course, the dog should go to her rightful owner, the person who had trained her and worked with her. But he couldn't help thinking of how devastated Ethan would be to lose Luna after everything they'd been through together. Dr. Vaughn seemed to read his thoughts. Staff Sergeant Coleman is currently stationed at the Marine base about 2 hours from here. She's requested permission to come see Aurora as soon as she's stable enough for visitors. Of course, Daniel said automatically. We wouldn't want to keep them apart. The vet placed a hand on his arm. For what it's worth, I've told the military liaison about Ethan and how instrumental he was in saving Aurora's life. They're very grateful, and I'm sure they'll take that into consideration when making decisions about her future. Daniel thanked her, though he wasn't sure what good that would do. Military regulations were military regulations after all. When he finally broached the subject of Luna's leg with Ethan, his son surprised him once again with his maturity. If she'll be in less pain with 3 legs, then that's what should happen, Ethan said, after considering the options Dr. Vaughn had explained. Mom always said it's more important to be healthy than to look perfect. Daniel felt a surge of pride at his son's wisdom. That's exactly right, buddy. And Dr. Vaughn says she'll still be able to run and play, just a little differently. Ethan nodded, then turned back to Luna. Did you hear that, girl? You're going to be like a pirate with a peg leg. That's pretty cool, right? Luna's tail thumped weakly against the table, as if in agreement. The decision made, Dr. Vaughn scheduled the amputation surgery for the following morning. She's stronger now, and her blood values are much better thanks to the transfusion, she explained. Her chances of coming through the surgery successfully are good. That evening, as they prepared to leave Luna for the night, Officer Chen arrived with some unexpected news. We've arrested Marcus Gage, he announced with satisfaction. Found multiple illegal traps on his property, along with evidence linking him to an underground dog-fighting ring. Dog-fighting? Daniel repeated, appalled. Is that why he stole Luna, Aurora? Chen nodded grimly. We believe so. Military working dogs are known for their intelligence, physical abilities, and training. In the sick world of dogfighting, a dog like Aurora would be considered a valuable asset, especially if she could be bred. The thought made Daniel's stomach turn. He glanced at Ethan, who was thankfully out of earshot, saying goodnight to Luna in the ICU. That's why he was so determined to get her back, Daniel realized. She wasn't just any dog to him. Exactly, Chen confirmed. And with his arrest, the district attorney is preparing multiple charges: animal cruelty, theft of government property, illegal trapping, and operating a dog-fighting ring. He's facing serious prison time. Good, Daniel said firmly. After what he put Luna through, he deserves it. Officer Chen hesitated, then added, The DA will need your testimony, both about finding Aurora in the trap and about Gage's attempt to reclaim her by force. Would you be willing to testify in court? Daniel didn't hesitate. Absolutely, whatever it takes to make sure he pays for what he did. What about Ethan? Chen asked, lowering his voice. His testimony could be powerful, but I understand if you don't want him involved in a court case. Daniel looked at his son, still talking softly to Luna. Let me think about that. I don't want to put him through more trauma, but I also want him to see that standing up for what's right has consequences. Good ones. Chen nodded in understanding. Just let us know. The preliminary hearing won't be for at least a couple of weeks. After Officer Chen left, Daniel collected Ethan, and they returned to the motel for the night. As he tucked his son into bed, Ethan asked the question Daniel had been dreading. Dad,